Hello, I'm Mira Reisberg and welcome to this short, sweet talk on Common Core standards and how to use them as a tool. I'm going to start by talking a little about education, and then I'm going to share my screen with you. And when I share my screen with you, I'm going to show you a little about the Common Core standards and why you shouldn't worry about them. So first of all, a little about education. Well, maybe a little about me. I used to be an education professor where I taught children's literature and I taught art education and I taught all sorts of good stuff. And one of the things that I had to do as a professor was learn about the national and state standards and then teach my students how to use them. And the way that I like to work with them was to do whatever I wanted and then to go back into the standards and see where I could match those standards to what I was doing. So that's my first tip. And I don't have this all mapped out. This is kind of a spontaneous thing that I thought might be helpful. The other thing I want to talk with you about is how education is constantly trying to find new ways to make sure that all kids get educated and that they get a good education. Now, the definition of what a good education is something that differs with different people. For me, my concept of a good education includes a lot of imagination, a lot of play, a lot of getting out of the chairs, a lot of creativity and art, which doesn't necessarily match what traditional ideas for education are right now. And I personally think that we need those things if we're going to do well, because we need to be a country of innovators and adventurers and explorers. But that's my thing. And so I don't want to, spend too much time talking about that, and I may even edit it out. I'm not sure yet. So one of the things with the Common Core standards is that it focuses on what are called expository texts. So I'm going to pause a second and go and share my screen. And here we have expository. I just went to Wikipedia, I typed in expository. I could have gone to dictionary.com, but I came here because it gives a nice quick overview of what expository is. And it's a kind of communication, or here as they say, a mode of discourse, a rhetorical mode. And what it basically is, if you look here, it's a type of more formal writing that is very fact-driven. We've got anecdotes, autobiography, biography, novels, oral history, short story. And what they don't mention is non-fiction. But it's talked about here in a different way. Business letters, how-to essays, news stories, press releases, reports, scientific reports, term papers, blah, 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 blah. So what's happening is with the Common Core standards is that they want 50% of all children's books in schools, and the children's book market is a huge market for publishers. They want 50% to be expository texts. So that means non-fiction, whether it's biography, science, math, however. Now, you can be very creative with nonfiction, and nonfiction can include historical fiction and faction. And faction is a combination of fiction and fact, where you are sharing facts in a fiction format that makes it much more playful and more entertainment-oriented, while still teaching a ton of information. Because the way these Common Core standards are geared, it's to be very informationally oriented. So that's a little about expository text, 50% non-fiction. But also, don't despair if you're not a non-fiction writer, because the other 50% is fiction. So just keep doing what you're doing if you're not interested in incorporating a lot of factual information and just doing wonderful, imaginative, lyrical, fun, poetic, whatever stories. Don't worry about it. But if you are interested, here are some ways to go about it. Now, earlier I mentioned how when I was a professor, I would just write whatever I liked and then go look for it. So let's head on over to the Common Core Standards themselves. Key points in mathematics. So if you can integrate a whole bunch of whole numbers, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions, and decimals, way to go. Or write really playful stories about these. Way to go. And so here, I have a friend that's written a story, and it includes, it's about going on a trip, and while she's there, she measures all these different things, and she finds out how tall stuff is, and how much of a percentage something is. And it's a really fun story that incorporates a bunch of math standards. So let's go in here and have a look. And so what I would do is I would go to grade 3, and here she is, measurement and data. And then I would look down here and look at these. This one would work. Recognize area as an attribute of plane figures and understand concepts of area measurement. Recognize area as additive. So if she said, well, first, the first day we traveled 100 miles. The next day we traveled another 100. That meant that we had traveled 200 miles so far in 2 days. So you can see how she's incorporating that additive information right in there. So, have a look here. And then what I would do next is, and so that number in my cover letter, if I was this fabulous student, I would say incorporates Common Core Standards for Math 3.5D, 0.6.7D. And so whoever's reading this will know that it's for 3rd grade. And I might look and see what there is for 2nd grade. So maybe she can incorporate some subtraction in there as well. And then just use these numbers. So can you see the concept for that? It's really not that hard. But you've got to be accurate. You can't just, throw in a couple of gratuitous numbers and then say that, oh, it meets such and such standard. You want to make sure that it's a meaningful standard that you can apply to your story. Okay, gang, so when we come on over here to the language arts part of the Common Core Standards, and it's really divided into 2 sections. One is math and one is language arts. And fortunately, language arts does include a bunch of other stuff such as speaking and listening. As an author, though, if you can incorporate this, it can be helpful in terms of selling your work in the market. And you just do it very low key. As I mentioned, you just do it in really meaningful ways. And if you can't do it in really meaningful ways, don't do it, because it'll just make you look like an idiot, which you don't want. You want to look like a professional, like a fabulous professional. So here's a bunch of stuff that I really encourage you to spend some time just playing around with. Using linking words. So here's great, because, therefore, since, for example, if your story has a whole bunch of those, you can talk about that. So look at it. See where you can make those connections. I'm going to jump over to another page here and show you a place that I've made a connection. And that's right here. And so I'm going to show you a place that I've made a meaningful connection. And I've got a story that uses vernacular language and idioms or sayings. Here, when I go to vocabulary acquisition and use, I see that if I go to demonstrate understanding of figurative language, so idioms are definitely figurative language, and then distinguish the literal and non-literal meanings of words and phrases in context. So that's definitely what an idiom is. And I think in 4th grade, around the same L.3.5, it actually uses the term idiom. So I might just say this story uses vocabulary acquisition and use from grades 3 and 4, or I might use the specific L.3.5. So you can see, you can just go in there, root around. Let's have a quick look at speaking and listening, and that's got some fun stuff in it. It actually references poetry in one of them. Here we go, 3.5. Create engaging audio recordings of stories or poems that demonstrate fluid reading at an understandable pace. Add visual displays. So I guess that's how they're trying to incorporate art, but it's really kind of tragic what's happening with art in the standards. So that's it for now. Thank you. I hope this was helpful, and don't be intimidated. Just play with them. Just fool around. Just see how you can make it work for you. And if not, just ignore it. It's not a make or break deal. It's just something that's helpful. Bye.